Welcome to our third web-based training series on malignant neoplasms for ICD-10 coders on oncology ICD coding. This training is designed by the CDC Foundation CWT team led by Hamed, aiming to enhance proficiency in assigning accurate diagnosis codes within various healthcare settings. Our comprehensive training plan adheres to the coding and sequencing guidelines from the 2016 5th edition, tabular list, instruction manual, and alphabetical index of ICD-10. The series comprises of 4 detailed PowerPoint presentation sessions designed to build on the previous one, ensuring a robust understanding of malignant neoplasm coding. My name is Dr. Yusuf Hamed. I am a mortality classification specialist and ICD consultant at the CDC Foundation. This presentation is based on guidelines and rules for neoplasm mortality coding in ICD-10 2016 Volume 2. Additional explanatory notes and examples have been included without altering the original instructions from Volume 2, 2016. Notes and instructions can also be found at the beginning of Chapter 2 in Volume 1, Tabular List, specifically focusing on neoplasms, that is C00 to D48 on page 167. Further notes can be referenced in Volume 3, specifically in the alphabetical index to diseases and nature of injury, indexed as neoplasm starting from page 435. Additionally, after each presentation, exercises will be provided to assess the understanding and effectiveness of the presentation in relation to the relevant sections of the 2016 ICD-10 Volume 2. This slide features a flowchart illustrating the ICD coding process related to medical certification and causes of death. The flowchart consists of 3 main blocks with sequential steps. Cause of death in a medical certificate refers to the international form and guidelines for filling it on Annex 7, page 203. Direct ICD-10 coding, index and tabular list involves basic coding guidelines from Volume 2, page 28, section 3.3. Selection of the underlying cause of death includes steps SP1 to 8 and concepts rules for mortality coding in Volume 2, starting from page 31, section 4. This flowchart serves as a guide for medical professionals on recording causes of death, utilizing the ICD-10 system for coding and selecting the underlying cause of death based on specific steps and rules outlined in the reference materials. There are 4 sessions on Introduction to Neoplasm Coding. It covers the following sessions. Session 1, Introduction to Neoplasm Coding with the objective of understanding malignant neoplasm coding basics, focusing on behavior, topography, and morphology. Session 2, Primary and Secondary Coding Malignant Neoplasms, with the objective of reviewing the guideline for coding malignant neoplasms, including multiple cause codes and secondary coding for malignancy. Session 3, where there's more than one primary neoplasm with the objective of addressing complex scenarios involving multiple primary malignant neoplasms, and ambiguous site indications. 4. Metastatic cancer coding, with the objective of focusing on coding metastatic cancers and understanding metastatic from and metastasis to concepts. This slide uses a simple layout with clear objectives and topics for each session, emphasizing a professional and informative approach to neoplasm coding training. Main topics for section 3. The primary focus of today's session will be coding neoplasms in various scenarios. We'll delve into multiple primary malignant neoplasms, that is understanding how to accurately code when there are multiple primary cancers, sites that are not clearly indicated, strategies for coding when the site of the neoplasm is ambiguous or not clearly documented, unknown primary sites, approaching to coding when the primary site of the cancer is unknown, overlapping sites, that is guidance on coding neoplasm that span multiple anatomical sites. By the end of this session, you should have a solid understanding of how to handle these scenarios in your coding practice. Let's get started with a quick recap of our previous sessions. In this recap, we highlight 2 key considerations for coding neoplasm. First, determine the behaviors of the neoplasms, that is, malignant, in situ, benign, uncertain or unknown behavior, and their anatomical locations, as discussed in session 1 and outlined in the 2016 Instructions, Volume 2, Section 435A. Second, decide whether to code the neoplasm as primary or secondary, a topic covered in Session 2 and detailed in Section 435B of the same volume. Understanding these aspects ensures accurate and consistent coding. Now let's proceed to the main topics for today's session. When reporting more than one primary malignant neoplasms on the same certificate, each neoplasm should be coded using codes from C00 to C76, C80, or C81 to C96. Indications of multiple primary malignant neoplasms include different morphologies, site-specific morphologies not listed as common metastasis sites, and sites not on the common metastasis list. If one morphology term is less specific but covers a more specific term used on the certificate, consider them as referring to the same neoplasm. The terms cancer or carcinoma should not be considered morphological terms, but as synonyms for malignant neoplasm. Accurate coding ensures proper classification and understanding of each neoplasm reported. This slide provides 2 examples of cases with more than one primary malignant neoplasm. It explains that if the neoplasms are of different morphologies and not on the list of common metastasis sites, they should be coded as separate primary neoplasms. The first scenario is where a patient has a transitional cell carcinoma of the bladder and primary osteosarcoma of the knee, noting that these are of different morphologies and both are considered primary neoplasms. Multiple cause coding instructions, only one line in part 1. Therefore, the underlying cause of death is C679. It mentions that blood cancer is not on the list of common metastases, and the osteosarcoma in part 2 is specified as primary. The second example includes hepatoma, liver cancer, and breast cancer, both of which are considered primary, as breast cancer is not on the list of common metastases. Multiple causing instructions use SP5, that is, no sequence, and selects C220 as the underlying cause of death. The coding for these conditions is also provided with specific ICD codes for each type of cancer. This slide describes situations where a neoplasm site is not clearly indicated in medical descriptions. It specifies two main scenarios. When a malignant neoplasm is described as being in the area or region of a site, or when the site is prefixed by the terms like peri, para, pre, supra, infra, or similar expressions, advising to first check if the compound term is included in the alphabetical index in such cases. This slide guides how to code morphologies when a compound term is not found in the alphabetical index. It instructs to classify these morphologies into one of the categories listed, which include various types of neoplasms and cancers, each associated with specific code, that is C40 to C72. The categories cover a range of body systems and tissues, from bone and skin to the nervous systems and soft tissues. For example, a fibrosarcoma in the region of the pancreas should be coded as such if no more specific site is provided. It should be coded as a malignant neoplasm of connective tissue and soft tissue of the abdomen, that is C494. The slide shows that the carcinoma site is not clearly indicated. That is, it just mentions the carcinoma is in the lung area. The rules and guidelines for mortality coding guide the coder to coding malignant neoplasm of other and ill-defined sites within the thorax as C761. This slide shows that the condition entered in line B is carcinoma. A carcinoma is a type of cancer that develops from epithelial cells, which are the cells that line the internal and external surfaces of the body. In this case, the primary malignant neoplasm site is not specified. It should be coded as malignant neoplasm without specification of site, that is C809. The slide emphasizes that you should not assume the primary site based on other reported conditions like obstruction of the intestine, etc., as these conditions may result from the neoplasms spreading from unrelated sites. For instance, an internal obstruction might be caused by the spread of a malignant neoplasm of the ovary or from other anatomical sites. Now let's discuss cases where the primary site of a neoplasm is unknown. An example provided is a secondary carcinoma of the liver with an unknown primary site. Line 1B should be coded as primary carcinoma without specification of the site, that is C800. This slide provides an example where in line C, the primary site is unknown, but where generalized metastasis and melanoma are present. Rules and guidelines for mortality coding guide the coder to code the primary malignant melanoma as primary malignant melanoma of unspecified site, C439. This slide shows an example of primary site unknown, but also mentions a possible primary site. The rules and guidelines for mortality coding specifically guide the coder that if a certificate mentions a probable or possible primary site, the expression indicating doubt should be disregarded, and the site should be coded accordingly. Example 32 shows a case of secondary carcinoma of the liver with the primary site unknown, but possibly the stomach. The instruction is to ignore the word possibly and code it as a primary malignant neoplasm of the stomach. That is C169. Now, let us discuss the coding guidelines in cases where the malignant neoplasms is of overlapping sites. The term overlapping in this context indicates that the affected sites are next to each other, meaning the neoplasm involves multiple adjacent areas or overlaps contiguous sites. The common sites of overlapping neoplasms include different areas where different types of tissues are interconnected or close to each other, such as the head and neck region, pelvic area, or abdomen. This slide refers to the coder in the use of subcategories 0.8 for coding malignant neoplasms of overlapping sites as described in Chapter 2, Volume 1, Note Section 5. A neoplasm that overlaps contiguous sites and whose point of origin cannot be determined should be classified to the subcategory 0.8, that is overlapping region, unless the combination is specifically indexed elsewhere. In mortality coding, this code should be used only if the lesion is expressly described as overlapping, or if the anatomic term on the death certificate indicates an overlapping site. It also clarifies that this code should not be used if a malignant neoplasm has spread within the same organ or organ system. This slide provides an example of overlapping malignant neoplasms, specifically involving the tongue and floor of the mouth as the use of the 0.8 subcategory. The neoplasm is explicitly described as overlapping, which means it involves multiple adjacent areas or overlaps contiguous sites. The slide explains that such neoplasm should be coded in the 0.8 subcategory, that is C14.8. This is the last slide that provides an example of a malignant neoplasm located at the rectal sigmoid colon, which specifically indexed as C19, indicating a malignant neoplasm of the rectal sigmoid junction. This example does not use the 0.8 subcategory. It explains that an anatomical term, rectal sigmoid, used on the death certificate indicates an overlapping site. In a separate Word document, there are exercise questions on coding malignant neoplasm based on Session 3. Participants are strongly advised to attempt all the questions. The objective of the exercise is to enhance a firm understanding of coding neoplasms as presented in Session 3. Answers to the exercises will be provided. The next coding workshop training session will be held in September, focusing on metastatic cancer coding. The objective is to enhance understanding of coding metastatic cancers, particularly the nuances of metastatic from and metastatic to. Participants are strongly advised to read and familiarize themselves with session 4 beforehand. The presentation will be based on the ICD 10-2016 Volume 2 Instruction Manual, Section 435G, Malignant Neoplasms, available at the provided link. Thank you.